Rookie camp is over for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we're going to get you some more insight on how things went and specifically what we saw that might be different this year from other years. That and some questions that we take here right on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here today with Alan Saunders of Pittsburgh Sports Now. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting app and especially on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And as I said before, we're joined by Alan Saunders. You can read all his work at SteelersNow.com. He's the man there. He was at rookie camp with me. We were chilling in the hot sun, watching some guys run around without some pads on, but it was still good times. Good to have you back, Alan.
It was football-like, and that was good enough for me.
Exactly. And I think I posted like a minute and a half clip of just Broderick Jones doing some pass rush, just footwork drills. And I saw people like, oh, football. Yes, please. More. Yes. And I was like, guys, it's May. We got a long way to go. But I do think there were some cool things. And as I said before leading into this, the biggest thing about rookie camp that I look to see, one, are people not injured? And two, are how do guys talk when we get to meet them? Now that they're in the facility, they're taking things on. How do they respond to questions? And it's still all preliminary. It's grains of sand into the big beach that is going to be their career. But I think we saw some interesting things there. I want to play this clip of Broderick Jones because as we talked about last week, or we not even last week, we showed a clip of him on our Saturday bonus episode. Go check that out if you missed it, by the way, of him talking about being excited to go up against Joey Bosa in week 1 of the season. Here's more of him talking about what he's looking forward to and working with the Steelers and maybe even looking forward to with his coaches. So here's Broderick Jones.
Getting drafted is a special moment, but does it feel like a little bit more real? Do you put the helmet on and step on a field?
Yeah,
what's that experience like?
It's definitely real now. Just being here in the facility with the pads on, the gear, getting to it, learning stuff, learning new things, and, just trying to figure it out. So,
when this ends, will you stick around here or will you head back home for a little bit? Or after this weekend?
No, I'll be here.
Kirby Smart talked about the great relationship he had with you. What's your first impression of getting to know Coach Meyer and Coach Tomlin?
Oh, man, just being around them. That's the best way for me to feel somebody out, just being around them, seeing what they're like, what makes them, what motivates them, what ticks them, just the little things. So, really haven't been around them a whole bunch, not a lot of time, but, as time goes on, I plan to get to know them very well.
You looking forward to going up against TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith in a couple weeks?
I'm looking forward for everything, man. I'm just ready to get to work because I know those guys are going to push me to make me better. So, at the end of the day, win, lose, or draw, however it goes, I'm always ready.
Now, Alan, when we're talking about being ready, we're talking about the challenges that Broderick Jones is going to face here. We brought it up briefly on the Saturday podcast, but then you and I talked about it even more on the Final Word WPXI on Sunday night. Broderick Jones not only faces Nick Bosa in week 1, he potentially faces Myles Garrett in week 2 with the Browns, Maxx Crosby with the Raiders in week 3 with with Las Vegas, and then maybe even Will Anderson, the 3rd overall pick of the draft with the Houston Texans in week 4. That's a lot of really talented, high prestige, high profile pass rushers he's going to have to go up against. He's going to need TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, I think, to put him through the ringer. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing about this whole lead up to September is how fast does he take on those challenges?
I think it's important for like this season. I don't know that it's important in the long run. I think people get ahead of themselves. Like linemen take a long time to develop sometimes.
They do.
I don't think that's a secret around the NFL. And this is a guy that has a lot of work to do in terms of his pass protection. I think he's a pretty solid run blocker right now and could be if he had to play right away. But I think to me, it doesn't matter to me when Broderick Jones plays as long as he plays well. You know, like those are really good pass rushers. I don't think it's like a 5-alarm fire if we see Dan Moore go out there week 1. Like he's done really well against Myles Garrett. Let's throw that out there. He has done really, really well against Myles Garrett. Like I think I would have to be really impressed by what I see from Broderick Jones in training camp to think that he would be the better option from a pass protection standpoint in week 2. Like I don't know. I just think that's a lot to put on this guy's plate right away. I think he has a ton of talent and is going to be a really good player. But I don't think it's a disaster if he doesn't start week 1. Honestly, think like that Texans game, and then you got kind of the schedule kind of lightens after that, right? Like I don't know. It seems like there's a nice, and then that week 6 bye, like seems like if you want to work a rookie lineman in, there's like a kind of good spot on the schedule there to do it. I don't hate that idea. So I don't know. I think we're probably getting a little ahead of ourselves to be counting reps for Broderick Jones against Nick Bosa and Myles Garrett. Let's see how he does against TJ and Alex Highsmith first, because like you said, those guys are going to put him through the ringer. And, it was great. One of the things that Broderick said in his introductory press conference was that it was those practices his freshman year at Georgia that he really valued when he was going up against, 6 first-round draft picks as a freshman offensive lineman, that he really felt accelerated his growth and got him ready. But, he was a 5-star prospect, went to Georgia, didn't play his first year at all, didn't play his second year until like the 8th or 9th game. So, I mean, I don't know. We'll see how he goes. We'll see how he takes. He's got a lot of work to do, but I'm not feeling like this is I don't think the Steelers drafted him because they need him to play left tackle September 7th. I think they drafted him because he has the ceiling to be a really good starting left tackle in the league when he gets there.
The question will be, will he be able to win that starting left tackle spot by the start of the season? And like you said, it doesn't mean the end of the world or that he was a bust of a pick if he's not the day one starter. Like you said, there's guys. Chukwuma Okorafor, I think, is still growing into being an offensive lineman. Heck, defensive linemen take time. Cam Hayward didn't become an all-pro, Pro Bowl guy until
start the first 2 years. He didn't start for third season. It took Cam. Now drafted 31st instead of 14th, but I mean, Cam Hayward's an all-time great. Linemen take some time sometimes.
Yeah. Linemen take time. It takes time to fill out your bodies, and Broderick Jones is really young. But like we're talking about here, I think a big part of this is also going to be how does he personally take on – he's going to get beat. He's going to get beat bad. And that was one thing I give Dan Moore a lot of credit for. The Steelers threw him in a lot of fire early on, and that first year, Alex Highsmith whooped him. I mean, it was just up and down, just every rep, he was getting killed. Now, it wasn't that Alex Highsmith wasn't beating him in year 2, but he was able to hold his ground a bit more, and he looked more formidable as a left tackle, and that's where the progress was seen there. And even so, Dan Moore Jr. is still not a guy that I think projects to be the long-term starter at left tackle for this team. Granted, that's why they drafted Broderick Jones. But the point I make is this. We're going to see a lot of top-tier edge rushers coming through the season because, mind you, some of those guys we named in Myles Garrett, they're going to have to play them again later in the season anyways. The Steelers just have to see Broderick Jones making progress throughout all this time. And I think it's going to be up to Mike Tomlin, and it's going to be up to the Steelers as staff as a whole to make sure that he's growing in the right way so that he becomes Kenny Pickett's blindside protector. Because to me, that's the ultimate part of this, is that the Steelers have to make sure in that early gauntlet of pass rushers, I'm less worried about Broderick Jones, getting embarrassed, and more worried about what might happen to Kenny Pickett if he does get embarrassed and the hits he might be forced to take, which was the whole reason why they've been investing into this offensive line.
Right. You get the offensive lineman to protect Kenny Pickett. You're not going to then put an offensive lineman that isn't ready for that workload out there, because that's doing the opposite of protecting Kenny Pickett. Right. I mean, and so look, I don't think Dan Moore's a great left tackle, but I think he's good enough that if they don't feel that Jones is ready, they're not going to feel the need to rush him. There's some spots in this. There's the week 6 bye. There's 2 other long weeks later in the year because they have Thursday night games. So then they have like a 9-day week in between games. Like, there's plenty of time to fit a guy into the starting lineup. It's harder at tackle than it is at other positions because, Joey Porter Jr., he's going to play. Whether he starts or not doesn't really matter. Who cares? He's going to play a lot. Week 1, we'll figure it out how much going forward. But, usually you want to have one tackle. But I think there's some time to work him in. I'm not feeling the need to rush him. We'll see how things go.
We will see how things go, and it'll be a lot to be talking about. But I think again, it's going to be really interesting to see how he grows in the process and how close will he be to starting. That'll be one of the major things that we see. Can't tell that right now. It's football without pads. That's a big part of this. It's just growing.
How did he look at rookie camp? It's like, well, he didn't lay his hands on another guy in anger.
Exactly.
So he looked tall. I don't know what else you want me to say.
he looked tall, but I'll say this: the way he handled himself, he seemed like he was open-eyed. And one thing that I asked Tomlin about in the presser on Saturday at the end of the rookie camp media sessions, I asked him. Kirby Smart talked about how he was just Broderick Jones was just an eager learner, and he was quick to like work with his coach, and he wanted to be coachable. And I asked Tomlin, like, did he live up to that? And Tomlin was like, yeah, sure he did, but everybody should when it's rookie camp. And so I thought it was kind of refreshing that he was just like, I'm not giving this kid any credit just because he showed up and did what we expected him to do in the first 2 days of practice. And it was just like, the way that's a very Tomlin thing to do, is just like, yeah, sure, but we expect he's a first round pick. We expect a lot more out of this guy.
Yeah. And I think he has a good mindset and a good attitude, though. That's a good thing to have. I don't expect Tomlin to give him any credit for it, but you can tell when guys are not fully focused on what's happening and not taking things seriously. And I think Jones is a pretty diligent guy who's going to work hard and have some fun. And I thought he has an energy to him that I thought was appreciated from the guys who are around him. So that's good to see too.
Absolutely. I want to talk more about where the Steelers are with some of those opponents we talked about, especially in the AFC. We'll get to that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, before we do that, I want to tell you guys about our great message from our sponsors, FanDuel, who sponsored this podcast. And with the NBA playoffs on fire right now, the conference finals are set. Lakers, Nuggets, Heat, Celtics. It's a lot of action right now. There's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And right now, they're giving all their new customers a no-sweat first bet, which gives you up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win on FanDuel. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you can sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. You could bet on who scores the most. Will Jimmy Butler go off again? Will LeBron be killing it? Will Jokic be able to post another triple-double? All different things you can bet on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Don't miss your shot on a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today by going to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com, Pittsburgh Sports Now, and all that. Alan, before we get to this, I want to just a reminder to everyone who watches the show, we're going to take a call here in just a second from one of the people that called in. And just a reminder, you can call in anytime at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, and keep your question under a minute, and we'll try to get you on the show. And we have a lot of calls that come in. There's a ton of calls that sometimes we don't get to, but I guarantee we will get to your call if you donate $10 to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation on the campaign link that I have provided above or on the screen right now. You can use the QR code that's currently on the screen if you want to use that to donate. There's also a link that'll be attached to this episode in the description, whether on YouTube or on whichever podcasting service you use. So, without further ado, let's get to Parker in the Pocono, who has a question about the Steelers standing in the AFC.
Hey, Chris, this is Parker from Pocono, PA. I got a question for you about Steelers with all the off seasons and the draft, which I think we did pretty good, getting key necessary players. How would you think the Steelers would do this season coming with how stacked the AFC is? Because getting Aaron Rodgers for the Jets, still got Patrick Mahomes, got your Joe Burrow. So just let me know what's your thoughts about how well the Steelers will do this season off of whatever happened on the offseason, which Omar Khan did a great job. All right, thank you. Have a great one.
Thank you, Parker. Appreciate the question. Appreciate everyone who does call into 412-223-6644 to leave us a question. Any donations you can give to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation campaign we got running here. But, Alan, before we get to how the Steelers will do in the AFC, let's talk about this. How does the AFC stack up right now? Is it overloaded with supreme talent that's going to make the Steelers' success that much harder to get than last year?
No.
Ooh.
I think this is such an overrated talking point. Like,
interesting.
Yeah, are there good teams in the AFC, and are the best teams currently in the AFC? Yes. And would you rather that not be the case? Sure. But look, I mean, the best teams in the AFC are the Chiefs, the Bengals, and the Bills, right? We can agree on that. Those are the best.
Yeah.
The Steelers beat two of those three in their building in the last 2 years when the Steelers were not good. Like, I don't know. Like, what? They don't scare me. They're good teams. I'm not like shaking in my shoes about playing those teams. Like, they have noticeable holes. The Chiefs maybe like slightly in a different category. Also, the Chiefs not on the schedule this year. Neither the Bills. That? Like, and the Jets. I love this one. Do you all remember our last viewing of the New York Jets as they were tripping and falling over losing to a Tua-less Miami Dolphins team keep the Steelers out of the playoffs? Do we just forget what the Jets looked like? And Aaron Rodgers was bad last year. Like, I don't know, maybe he'll be better. You reunite him with his coordinator. You put some decent, I think some pretty decent weapons around him. But, like, I don't know. Why are we anointing the Jets and just assuming that the Steelers aren't going to get a lot better too? I don't know. I don't see it. I think it's way over discussed. There isn't a team in the AFC I don't think the Steelers can beat.
The way you put it right there, I'm not too scared of the Steelers having a hard time beating any of these teams. And the other part of this, like you said, I'm going to pull up the schedule here. The teams that they play, like you said, they don't play the Chiefs or the Bills. And frankly, I think the Steelers, we saw them split with the Bengals last year, and heck, they came 7 points within sending it to overtime last year against them. In the second game. I think they can absolutely hang with them. And yes, sure, the Browns will have Deshaun Watson with a full year of being on the team. But the Browns also didn't add much to their roster this year because they didn't have a draft, because they are basically down to a third-round pick there. They lost Jadeveon Clowney. Now they just traded for Zadarius Smith. We'll see how that goes with that situation.
Like, I don't know. I mean, I think the Browns will be better, but they're not like, they're not terrifyingly good to me. I think the Steelers are way underrated in this whole conversation. I just don't understand why we're looking at the Jets and saying, oh, the Jets got Aaron Rodgers, who, by the way, was not very good last year and
he wasn't
old, okay, and saying, oh, my God, the Jets are going to be so much better. And we're looking at the Steelers, who played a rookie quarterback, have their whole team coming back, basically, and you're like, what? You're going to have a healthy TJ Watt probably. Like, why are we not talking about the Steelers like they're going to be a lot better? I don't get it. I don't know why the Jets. Oh,
it's firing up the comment section.
So much better, but the Steelers are going to be the same. I don't buy it.
You're firing up the comment section. I guarantee right now, like, yes, Alan Saunders, get him on every episode. He's bringing the heat. And I feel you, though. I feel you on the excitement, because here's my thing. I also think the Steelers are going to be pretty good this year. I'm not saying they're going to be Super Bowl contenders, but I'm right with you. They can walk up to the Bengals and take those guys on. The Bengals also lost both their starting safeties, who were a huge part of what made that defense good at times, and that was a big part of what made that team more of a balanced team last year. It wasn't just Joe Burrow lighting it up every week. That defense, especially in that playoff win against the Ravens, had to play very well for them to get where they are, and they lost two big pieces, and they're going to need to have some other overturns. I think there's going to be a lot of questions there. But like you said, going back to this schedule, I mean, some of the teams they got to face, like I said, I've said before, the Niners getting them in week one, I think that's the biggest favor the Steelers got as far as all of this. That being your week one game, they might have some QB problems. They had the best defense last year, and they got Javon Hargrave back now, but I think week one, the Steelers will be coming out fired, red hot, and they'll be ready to play. But you look the rest of the schedule, I mean, the Ravens and the Bengals, your division rivals, you go up against them all the time. Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, they were a playoff team, but they're still figuring out who they are as well. All these teams that are on their schedule are not some otherworldly caliber. Like, I don't look at this like last year when you and I, before the season, were looking at that run of the Eagles, the Bills, and the run that they were going to have. We were like, man, that's going to be a rough stretch. And sure enough, they started the season 1-6 or whatever, 1-7.
Yeah, I don't see anything like that this year.
Agreed. And like you said, last year they had a rookie quarterback. They lost their best player and maybe the best defensive player in the NFL still, TJ Watt, for 2 months, and somehow they rebounded and found a way to go 9-8. This year, you bar any of those types of injuries, you have a better Kenny Pickett, you hope. You've invested in the offensive line, but not just with Broderick Jones, with Isaac Seumalo and depth pieces. You've probably gotten a little bit sharper in your run game after the line coalesced last year. The pass game might be a little bit sharper because of all that. And then, as we said, the defense could be more. I look at this and I say, man, I'm right with you. As much as, yes, there's talent in the AFC, there's big names in the AFC. I think the Steelers could bang right with those guys, especially if they play the style of football. We're talking about them playing great defense, running the football well, and then making it a more balanced attack so Kenny Pickett doesn't have to air it out for them to win games.
And the Steelers have an easy schedule. Like they do. They have an easy schedule. Some of those other teams are going to play harder schedules than the Steelers are. They have the advantage this year of having not made the playoffs last year, of having finished third in their division, and they get an easier schedule because of it. And you know, like that's and they get some luck. Like they're playing the AFC South. I don't know. Maybe Jacksonville's good. The rest of those teams don't scare me at all. You know, like the NFC West is as down as it has been in a very long time. I mean, the Seahawks still had a good year last year, but I don't think anybody's looking at them like they're a Super Bowl team. The Cardinals are a disaster. Like, you know, I mean, I just think this sets up very nicely for the Steelers to me. I don't think that we should be terrified of this big bad AFC boogeyman like it's some unconquerable foe. And the last one to me is Lamar Jackson. The Steelers own that guy. Now, are the Ravens going to win a lot of games with him? Yeah, sure. Yeah. But like, if I'm the Steelers, I'm not particularly concerned about Lamar Jackson coming back. In fact, they've had a harder time with his backups than they've had with him. Like, you know, I don't know. He's a good player. I mean, obviously I have a lot of respect for him, but I don't think the Steelers should be shaking in their boots because he's coming back.
A thing that you said too as well, them finishing third in the division, they hadn't done that since 2012. Like they've been first or second for almost an entire decade, which means, you know, and that doesn't just mean, oh yay, like, you know, it's first or second place, but it's also that's the schedule you're being given. You're playing that's 3 games where you're getting either the best team of a division from the previous year, like the Chiefs, like the Bills, or you're getting the second best team, which some years was still the Bills if the Patriots were still on those years. You know, and I think that's a big part of what's happened with the Steelers. You know, in the past few years is that they've had to play some of the teams third in the division this year. That's changed up their schedule now when you look at it. That's part of why they're playing the Raiders instead of the Chiefs. You know, yeah. So again, I'm right with you, man. I think that whereas, yes, the AFC has some serious talent in it, but to answer Parker's question, I think they stack up very well in it, and I expect them to make the playoffs when all is said and done this year. Alan, we got to switch topics real quick and get to some more of your rookie camp thoughts here, because I want to ask you something that you were talking about off camera with, and how things might be a little different with how rookie camp worked, and some of that might give some insight into what Omar Khan and his front office is doing. We'll talk about that in a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders. Stick with us. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com, of course, Pittsburgh Sports Now group. Alan, something you and I were talking about, and it was about differences in rookie camps. Now, this was my first rookie camp that I've attended. I haven't been able to go to others because of other jobs that I've had, but this year, this was an opportunity. I got to see it, and you noted something after other rookie camps that you've covered that was a bit of a difference. Could you explain it to our audience and what you think it might mean?
Yeah, I thought there was just a different focus to this year's rookie camp. There were a lot of tryouts there. I mean, a lot of tryouts. And it was very clear. I wrote this at SteelersNow.com. This was an all-hands-on-deck scouting job to fill this roster. I mean, they have guys from all over, right? I mean, Gabe Oladipo from Texas Tech, All-American hammer and discus thrower, never played a down of college football. Clemson's backup quarterback, 8-year vet Nick Boyle, who's going to change his position to long snapper. Like, 6 guys from HBCUs, where Omar Khan was the only general manager to go to the HBCU Combine in New Orleans. And then they bring 6 guys to the rookie camp on tryouts. There's a kicker from Mexico. They were searching far and wide to find guys to fill this roster, and then they didn't treat them like camp fodder. I didn't think. I thought those guys got a chance to show what they could do, and it was this very interesting sort of breakdown where you saw position coaches, especially position coaches where the team has a high draft pick. So like Pat Meyer was just married to Broderick Jones. And Grady Brown had Joey Porter Jr. on this shoulder and Corey Trice on this shoulder all weekend, right? And you saw lots of instruction, individual instruction about technique and things the Steelers want to change and improve. And I could get into some super boring minutia about that. But if you're into that kind of thing, you can check it out at SteelersNow.com. But I'm not going to go into how exactly they want Broderick Jones' foot to move in his pass sets, but they want to change it. Okay. So we got all that, but then it was sort of like Tomlin in Canada and the scouts that were there and TA and those guys were sort of the evaluators, right? They were looking at these guys to see, okay, we've got 5 open contracts. That's more than I think I can remember them having going into this. Usually they're already at 90, and it's like, okay, if we're going to sign a tryout, we've got to cut a guy. I don't remember them having 5 spots open where it was this really like, hey, play your way onto this team. And I think it made for a really interesting camp and a little bit more like, hey, it's like we said, it's football in shorts, it's football like, but I thought it did make it like they gave them an opportunity to be competitive, and I like that. I haven't seen a lot of that in my experience in rookie camps over the years.
No, I agree. I think that there's in the sense that I don't get to see rookie camp, but I see rookie camp rosters, and it was kind of like, well, there's a lot of guys here, and it's just like there seems like there's something going on here that they're looking for something in someone, and part of it might be the rebuilding phase. We've talked about how I think this is a big chance for Mike Tomlin to rebuild how he wants his locker room to look, and I think he wants more guys that really want it. And an easy way to find those guys, not an easy way, it's actually pretty hard, but a way to find those guys, guaranteed, are guys who come to you and prove who they are to you from the jump. Not just guys you draft, but guys who earn their way onto the roster the hard way. And if you find those guys, and even if they're just special teamers for a couple years, they're the hardest working special teamers because they're your guys. They're not veterans that you signed off and coming in. Yeah, you can expect them to hold up a professional standard, but they're also going to be guys that may not be as invested into the team. Whereas if a guy comes into here, like I think it was Alonzo Graham, running back out of Morgan State, was a guy who was an HBC. He's an HBCU player, was brought in, and he earned it. He was signed. So
this big.
He's also tiny, but that's a guy who now
rocket motor behind him though.
Right. No, he gets going. But Alan, I mean, a guy like that. Now he's signed with an NFL team, and now he's going to be able to come into to OTAs. He's extra motivated to like, hey, every day I'm going to be proving it. And I think there's a competition that Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, this whole organization wants to foster amongst all the guys to fight for those last roster spots, and that'll push everyone else down the line and help create this environment that I think they want to rekindle with the Steelers locker room.
Yeah, a guy named Mike Panasiuk, who's he played defensive line at Michigan State, got to the NFL, moved to center with the Carolina Panthers, did the practice squad thing, washed out, got cut. Steelers had him in like the end of the year for a free agent visit. They were probably considering whether to sign him to like a reserve contract, put him on the 90-man. Then they didn't. He went to the XFL, was an all XFL center, I believe for St. Louis, and then comes back to try out a rookie minicamp. And he's like 30 in this rookie minicamp full of like 21, 22, 23-year-old guys. He's bald. He's got a big beard, stands out. But like, man, that guy wants it, right? Like that. I'm with you. I thought it was I don't want to make too much out of rookie minicamp in any direction, good or bad, but I did think there was a real positive competitive energy because of the way they structured things that I'm not sure I've seen in the past.
And I think that's if there's something to notice that's different about this rookie camp compared to others, that's what I think we're both looking at here is maybe a tonal shift for how the Steelers use rookie camp. Because like you said, in the past, it's been more so about, hey, we drafted these guys. Let's make sure that they get in. Let's see how adept they are. Let's see how serious they are. And then get them ready for OTAs because then that's what's going to.
And they didn't sign that many undrafted guys. There's only 6 undrafted free agents. Right. Usually they sign like 10, 12. It almost seems like they kind of intentionally held some spots to dangle some carrots for tryouts, right? Maybe. Like it almost kind of feels like that they could have signed some more undrafted guys right after the draft. They didn't. They left some slots over. They want guys to come in and earn it. I don't know. It's interesting. They're not a team that spends a lot of money in that undrafted free agent marketplace. And I think that's something where they've fallen behind a little bit, where like a lot of other teams are now giving out some like 6-figure signing bonuses and guaranteed money to undrafted guys. And I think they've decided they're not going to play that game. But maybe this is another way, instead of saying, okay, like, I don't know, we didn't get any of the guys we really wanted. Instead of just going down the line and going to the next guy, maybe they find a way to make that process more competitive and cast a wider net. Instead of signing one guy who you're not really sure about, let's bring in 30 of them, and then we'll know if we're really sure about them. And I think the Browns had 5 tryouts, and the Texans had 4, and the Steelers had 33. Like, there's something going on there, right? Like that's like you don't get that different from your peers unless there's something intentional happening.
I'm right with you. There's something going on here, and we'll see how the Steelers handle it. How many more of those tryouts guys that they will sign, and if they don't sign them, who do they go get? Because OTAs, I think we have a full week off of the Steelers doing their own things, but then OTAs will be starting up, and then mini camp is right around the corner, and then we will get to see who become all their training camp invitees. It's going to be a fun process seeing that. Find out more about that at Alan Saunders with his group of SteelersNow.com. Alan, let me know all the things you guys got coming up and where to find it.
SteelersNow.com, myself, Nick Faribaugh, the whole gang writing. We got some interviews left over from rookie camp, getting into some film on some of these rookies, going a little bit more in depth with that this week. And then, getting ready for OTAs. They'll be here before you know it, just next week. So a lot going on, and I'm just trying to take a couple days off here because I'm allowed to.
Well, yeah, you're the boss, man. You can do what you need to do. Alan, thanks so much for joining us here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Appreciate everything you do. Go check him out at @asaunders_PGH on Twitter to find his stuff, or SteelersNow.com to go all his written work. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Before I sign off, wanted to wish a happy belated Mother's Day to my mom. Was able to spend a nice brunch with her. I love her. I love you so much, Mom. I hope that you're continuing to have a great week going into everything else here. Thank you for everything you've ever done for me. I love you very much. And I'm Chris Carter, your host of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can also read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, where I cover all things Pitt athletics. You can also find this show, the Locked On Steelers podcast, on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, every podcast platform out there. We are there, and especially on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it on YouTube. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our daily episodes. And if you want to help out with the campaign we got going here on the show, Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, help us by donating to the cause that we have here below. If you use the QR code, it'll take you to my donation page. You can also use the link that's on screen. We also have it attached in the description of both the podcast episode on your audio platform that you're listening on, or in the YouTube description for you to get there as well. Any money helps us get closer to finding the cure for cystic fibrosis that impacts tens of thousands of people in America every year. Thanks again for everyone checking out the show. Back tomorrow with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.